Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be discussing a new tax proposal in the United Kingdom. We'll also be talking about federal air marshals possibly creating reports on suspicious people because they have a quota. We'll also be getting into a state trooper who managed to get off pretty easy, considering he killed a couple of people without much justification. That's coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
And thank you for tuning in to episode 176 of Free Minds TV, where we consistently challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. As always, it is still Toby here with you.
And Nick.
We have a huge show to get into, Nick. We're going to be traveling across the country, around the world, bringing you, the viewers at home, interesting news stories, and hopefully trying to make you think about them in a different way. Not the right, not the left, not the middle, but something different, something with a philosophy of liberty and freedom behind it. We are going to be getting into that story about air marshals essentially just creating reports, making stuff up to fulfill their government quotas. We're also going to be going over to the UK, talking about animal cruelty. People facing a severe jail time, huge fines for gulping down goldfish, college pranks, or animal abuse. We're also going to be getting into some new tax proposals in the UK, essentially giving the government your paycheck and then getting it back from them. But first, this story, we did talk about it on the radio show this week, but it's so important, I thought we should talk about it on the television side as well. A state trooper who a few years ago killed a couple of girls and now wants the state of Illinois to pay him for it. Let's get into this story. Matt Mitchell is asking the state to compensate him for injuries from a crash in which he hit and killed two Collinsville sisters in triple-digit speeds. Back on November 23, 2007, Mitchell was driving 126 miles per hour on a busy day after Thanksgiving on Interstate 64 near O'Fallon, some intersection somewhere or something, while sending and receiving emails and talking to his girlfriend on his cell phone. He crossed over the yellow line and had a head-on collision with a car that had several people in it, including two sisters who have since, well, they were killed instantly in the crash. Now, after the accident, Mitchell was suspended with pay, because clearly he was negligent and killed these girls, for nearly 2 years. He was paid $68,000 while suspended with pay each year for his salary. He resigned from the Illinois State Police after pleading guilty to criminal charges. Mitchell pleaded guilty to reckless homicide and driving in reckless homicide and reckless driving in exchange for a 60-month probation sentence. No jail time at all, just 30 months probation, less than 3 years probation for this reckless killing of these two girls.
That's a lot easier than most members of the public would get off for two charges of whatever it is in your state, negligent homicide, vehicular manslaughter. Some states have different names for it, but it's about the, it's like the least serious homicide, if you want to call it that, in terms of the sentence that it carries, because there was no intent to kill anybody, but you still your actions negligently.
Right, he was driving 126 miles an hour while taking personal phone calls, writing personal emails, while flying down the road here at 126 miles an hour. Now, he was responding to an accident. He was on the job, but he wasn't the first responder. He was just backup. So there was no need for this, especially on a Thanksgiving day. I mean, it's clearly reckless endangerment. He did end up killing these two girls, injuring a couple of other people in the car, but it doesn't stop there. This happened a couple of years ago. The reason we're reporting on it is now he's asking the state to pay him for the rest of his life in the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars workers' compensation because of his leg injury he sustained in the crash. Now, most people will say, it's frivolous, it's going to get thrown out. Unfortunately, not the case. According to multiple lawyers in this article, and I will post it up on our website up at freemindstv.com under the forum section for show content if you want to read through the whole article here. But it looks like he's probably going to get it because under the Illinois workers' compensation law, If you're on the job, even if you're drinking, using drugs, driving 126 miles an hour while talking on the cell phone and sending emails, you crash, you still get workers' compensation
Right, if you're on
for
the
it.
job while
Which
you're doing
just doesn't make any sense. It seems asinine, it seems crazy. So not only did this man kill a couple of girls, collect salary after that, allowed to resign, no jail time, but now he's going to be paid hundreds of thousands of dollars by the taxpayers for the rest of his life.
Most people would consider themselves lucky if they managed not only to avoid a prison sentence for 2 counts of homicide, but really their punishment was less than 3 years probation and 2 years of drawing about a $70,000 a year salary. So basically he got 2 years paid vacation and some headache of going to court. But 2 years paid vacation was essentially his sentence for killing 2 people. And if anyone else did this who was not a police officer, I find it very difficult to, or somebody who had some kind of political connections, I find it very difficult to believe
well, it
that
seems
they're
like
going
he
to get
should be
such
have
a light sentence.
more severe penalties because he's put in a position of responsibility, of trust to maneuver his vehicle in a way that does not endanger the public. It seems that, if anything, he should be held to a higher standard, not a lower standard. I mean, and now that his 2-year vacation is up and he's no longer getting paid for it, now he wants more money from the taxpayers. And how is it that there is a system set up that's going to give it to him? It's sick. It's disgusting. And this is one of the reasons that's wrong with a giant, enormous government, Nick, is because it creates programs that do things like this.
Well, that probably, I mean, certainly, I'm sure the people who set up the system didn't envision this case. I mean, I would think that if they had, they might have written
I'd like to
something
hope that that's not true.
Right. I seriously doubt that the people who
Right.
wrote it up had the intention that in a case like this, workers'
I'd
comp
agree.
would pay out. But they wrote the laws in such a way that that's exactly what it does. They wrote a very vague, broad law that was basically a catch-all. If you're hurt at work, your employer has to compensate you. It's one of the problems.
One of the unintended
it's a feel-good law,
consequences of a
then-
huge behemoth of a government. I mean, what are you going to do, though? I guess we'll talk about it. We'll become outraged, but still it's going on every single day. And that's one of the reasons why we want smaller and smaller governments, so you don't have crap like this of the taxpayers now paying this man out hundreds of thousands of dollars for the rest of his life.
Yeah,
because
basically a pension for murder.
Right. Meanwhile, the families are still out. They don't have their daughters. Now, once again, there's a civil suit, of course, on the family's behalf against not Mr. Mitchell here, who killed those
State of
girls,
Illinois?
but the state of Illinois.
And of course, it's a taxpayer, so you're going to have to pay that out.
Probably millions of dollars when it's finally settled.
Not the state of Illinois isn't really the responsible party.
Right, it's
but
the taxpayers.
Obviously, yeah, but I
Well,
mean,
this is,
the taxpayers and the state of Illinois as an entity. They're not really. They weren't. The state of Illinois didn't decide to drive 126
Mitchell
miles
did.
an hour.
That's why he
Right.
should be the one who's sued. He
But-
should be the one paying for this.
But the state of Illinois has deeper pockets, so of course they're going to go after state government.
I guess he's suing the state. They're suing the state. It's craziness.
But
Craziness.
the taxpayers are going to
craziness.
lose no matter what. No matter, assuming either party wins, and I assume at least one of them is going to.
In reality, this man should be working for a long time to pay the family back, not sitting on his butt at home collecting workers' compensation for the rest of his life. Anyways, we do need to move on, Nick. We've got to get into a story, well, not from the United States, but it's definitely proposals I've seen that are similar to this, where a system that's very close, and how the tax man operates, and where your paycheck goes. And this, it should send shivers up your spine, because it's not too long until it's probably going to be implemented in the UK, and then not too much time after that before it continuously creeps on over here to the United States. And it has to do
Governments
with...
are looking for novel tax schemes everywhere, particularly here in the U.S. Where
Yep.
the government's whether you're talking about federal or government or state governments, it's in a particularly, most of them are in a particularly bad situation. Some states are better off than others, but they're all looking for revenue. They're all looking to squeeze the average person.
Too
for
many
more
people
money.
are cheating the government out of their taxes. They're not paying in their full share. UK has a system to address this problem.
Well, or they are, and that's still not enough
Not
to
enough
cover
money.
the government spending, so they're going to raise taxes, and then people will stop paying them.
So what can the government do to make sure everyone pays their full share, Nick? Because there's a proposal.
Well, I guess they could just take all of your money and then decide how much of it to give back to you. That's the only scheme I could think of.
And
is that what they're doing?
Is it? It sounds craziness. That's insane. Could they really do this?
Can they?
You tell me.
Well, yeah, they can. The UK's tax collection agency is putting forth a proposal that all employees send employee paychecks to the government, after which the government would deduct what it deems as the appropriate tax and pay the employees by bank transfer. The proposal by Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, which my understanding is basically the British version of the IRS, stresses the need for employers to provide real-time information to the government so that it can monitor all payments and make a better assessment of whether the correct tax is being paid. So here in the United States, the responsibility to pay income taxes really falls with the employee. The employer has to issue a W-2 form, and it's the employee's responsibility to actually make sure they file, make sure the correct amount is paid. The IRS is going to come after you if the taxes were incorrect, not after your employer, unless your employer messed up their deductions, because employers have to pay taxes like Social Security tax. There are payroll taxes that employers have to cover. But as far as income tax goes, it's the individual that's responsible. Based on this story, and I didn't know this, currently employers withhold tax and pay the government in the United Kingdom, providing information at the end of the year. It's a system known as pay as you earn. There is no option for those employees to refuse withholding and individually file a tax return at the end of the year, as there is here in the United States. So it's already a system where the employers already take it straight out of your paycheck. You're not actually in charge of preparing your own taxes. Now they're talking about literally sending all paychecks to the government, and then the government, the tax agency, actually gives you whatever is left after your taxes. Which seems insane.
It does seem insane, Nick, but it's not that far off of where we are already. It's only a couple of brief steps that the government has to do before we're there too.
It's more procedural. And even in the United States, I mean, even if they were to do this here in the United States, it seems like a big change. I think it's more psychological.
Right.
It just seems more direct because the current paradigm, the current law is that the government really can set tax rates wherever they want. I mean, if they wanted to change the IRS code and set tax rates for average people at 60, 70% of your income, they can. It might not be politically popular, but they can change it on a whim. So in effect, the government already gets to decide how much of your income you get to keep. I mean, yeah,
but at least you can try to skirt
vote.
the law, though. You can try to, and millions of people do, millions upon millions of them every year try to get out of this. And that's why the governments are coming up with this scheme, is to make sure that everybody pays their full fair share.
Another thing I think you're going to see them go after is there are a lot of legally legitimate ways to reduce your tax burden, especially if you're somebody who's in business for yourself or who can, if you're a homeowner, you get a credit for that. So there's so many tax credits out there. I think for the first time ever, less than 50% of Americans actually ended up paying anything into the system. So more than 50% actually getting taxes back at the end of the year beyond what they paid in because of all these tax credits. So for many people, if you're on the lower end of the income scale or lower middle, tax season is really more like
government rebate.
It's kind of like Christmas, except the other 50% or so of people, a little less, have to pay for that. So it's actually stolen goods. But yeah, a lot of people look forward to tax season because they get money back. It seems like an odd system to me.
As the viewers know, the income tax, it just seems like such an evil tax because you're taxing a person's labor. And so say you're taxing at 10%, 15%, 50%, you're that much a slave to the government. I mean, that's what slavery is, 100% taxation, right? Because you don't get to keep whatever you earn, whether it's to your slave master or to the government, whoever it's to. 100% slavery is you don't get to keep any of your earnings. Now, if you're in a system where 100% of all earnings go to the government and then they give you back whatever they think is justifiable, it really makes you feel like that slave, Nick. Because you have to give you don't even get anything. The government automatically gets your check. They do their numbers, whatever they think, and they say, we think you deserve this much of what you earned.
It's I'm not just saying this for rhetorical purposes, but it's a very socialist tax. I mean, it was something advocated by Marx, and it's been advocated by socialists throughout history. But that's really where the idea of an income tax in its modern incarnation started. It's been around for a long time. In feudal societies, they actually used to take the food that you produce, sometimes at lower tax rates than what some people in the modern world are subjected to. But it's interesting to note that at one point, especially in the early American Republic, the idea was that the government exists to protect life, liberty, and property. We say pursuit of happiness here in the U.S., but it was really property or estate. And quite rightly, I think people point out that, well, only people who own property in most places could vote in the early Republic, plus black people couldn't vote, women couldn't vote. It was a very imperfect system. But the interesting thing was, in most places, only property owners had to pay taxes. Most people, if you were somebody in the lower classes, you really weren't paying very much in taxes at all to the government because they really didn't provide you with that many services. Because at that point, it was still fairly commonly accepted that the role of government wasn't to give you everything from health care to a job to housing. The idea was that government was around to protect life, liberty, and property. If you were someone who didn't own property, you really weren't gaining that much by paying into the system.
Right.
But now we have this behemoth of a government that supposedly takes care of us from cradle to grave. They do a very poor job of it. How good of a job did they do helping you save for retirement by forcing you to pay in?
Right.
And then stealing all the money. They don't care about
It's
you.
definitely
really
a screwed up system.
They
but
say
I
they
think
do, but they don't.
It is a screwed up system already. But I think that the way the UK is going, and a lot of people out there want the United States to go in the same direction, that would make it even worse. So I think it's important to bring up because watch down the line, there's going to be more clamoring for this kind of thing, Nick. I mean, as the UK probably passes this in the next few years, people in the United States are going to start to clamor for it as well because
they're already
facing a huge deficit, Nick.
Some people in America are already clamoring for a value-added tax, which is more complicated, but it's basically what they're advocating as a national sales tax. Every time goods or services change hands, not just a sales tax at the cash register at the end, but from the factory
to the
fair store.
Tax? Is that what they're calling the fair tax?
I don't know what this proposal is being called.
The point of that matter is
they're advocating for higher taxes.
The taxes goes up every time you buy something, so you could have something that's been taxed 10 times before it hits your hands.
It's a 5% tax, 10 times.
Anyways, tax is very. I mean, it's a very it's a political show we're doing here, but I mean, everybody has their different opinions on how, if you're going to have a government, how they're taxed. And the one I really want to stay away from is you giving all your money to the government and then
it's all the government stealing from you.
It is
forcible taking.
Right.
If you're going to have a government, even a very small one, you're going to have some taxes. But they shouldn't be a broad tax on people's labor or on economic activity like a sales tax.
Right.
If you're going to have taxes, hopefully they can be narrow, and taxes, things like the room and meals tax that they have in New Hampshire, where if you eat out at a restaurant or get a hotel room, if they're taxing non-essential
like luxury
items,
type
right,
stuff.
and things that you can avoid,
right,
in a reasonable way, then that's a lot less offensive to me than a broad-based tax where they basically just take your labor from you.
Right. I mean, the more I work, the more I pay in taxes. That's kind of unfair. And then the lazy guy sitting at home on the couch who's not working gets money back at the end of the year.
That's where the money goes. Well, that's where a lot
Why
of
do
money
I want to
goes.
work harder? And now there's all the socialists are watching us going, they want the billionaires to keep all their money. Anyways, Nick, we do need to move on. When we come back from the break, we're going to stick in the UK. We're going to talk about eating goldfish. Is it a college prank or animal abuse? We'll also be getting into that story about the air marshals just essentially making stuff up to fill quotas. That and more. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV.
This is Glenn Jacobs, and you're watching Free Minds TV.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV. It still is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
I'd like to invite you to log on to our website, freemindstv.com. From there, there's all the archives of the show, the radio shows, ways to help us out, donate us money, contact us, the show content on the forums, and so much more up at freemindstv.com. All right, Nick, when we left, we were talking about taxes in the UK and a new form of taxes. I want to stick over there because they always seem to do foolish, asinine type things. And the latest is, well, they're going after people for gulping down goldfish. It looks like a cruel Chris Caswell was arrested yesterday over a sick stunt that was videotaped by his giggling pals and then posted on Facebook. The lout, 30, paid $1.99, 1.99 pounds, for the fish, and then asked the staff to put it in a glass full of water that he had brought with him to the pet shop. He said he just lived across the road and was going to put it in a tank when he got home. Well, the puzzled shop owner, or shop worker, I guess it says here, did agree and put the goldfish into the cup. He then proceeded to gulp it down and laughed, giggling, as his friends followed him out of the store. Now, that was a year ago. He thought, I was drunk with my friends, stupid college prank, who cares? But then, police knocked down his door. Let's take a look at the video and see if it deserves a police raid on your home and then a possible $20,000 fine and up to 6 months in jail.
Let's
take a look.
$30,000.
It's a lot of money. Anyways, I want to see the clip.
Yeah, how much is that?
Get drunk. Go on. Goldfish down the hatch.
And as you can see, I mean, he did. He drank the goldfish. He's not denying it. He said it was a joke. He was drunk with his friends. It was over a year ago. He says he actually likes animals and has several pets.
What's a fine for killing a fly?
It's
a friggin' goldfish. I mean, how about mouse traps? Is that legal or is that cruel?
Well,
snapping a mouse's neck, or
only if you don't eat it, I guess. I mean,
what about those glue traps where they just kind of struggle until they dehydrate
wait,
and
Nick,
die?
what about cows and chickens and fish? I don't go a day without eating some kind of animal. The bigger the brain, the better. This is a very small animal with a very small brain. Its memory is what, 3 seconds or something?
That's what I've heard.
He's gonna forget going down the mouth by the time he hits the belly. And he's not only did the police raid his home and drag him out in a dawn morning raid because they saw something posted on Facebook.
A year-old Facebook clip. Goldfish.
£20,000 fine, about $30,000, and up to 6 months in jail for this. Damn, what's going to happen if I go to McDonald's and eat a hamburger over there? Why is it that a goldfish is illegal to drink or eat or whatever, but yet you can devour animals every single day?
Yeah, there's a lot of inconsistency there, isn't there?
It seems like it. It seems, if anything, the cow with the bigger brain should be more protected than the teeny little goldfish.
And people don't...
And by the way, I'm not suggesting that. Man, I love cows. They're delicious.
They shouldn't be protected. No, they're delicious. They should be eaten and turned into clothing.
But it's so asinine how people draw these lines of what's okay and what's not. It's so arbitrary. So arbitrary.
Yeah, and people don't like to question that. Because, I mean, or at least the people who write stories like this when they come out don't.
Right, they call it a sick stunt, the appalled workers. Okay, yeah, it's a stupid thing to do, but who cares? It's a goldfish. You could go to the store and eat a much bigger fish with a bigger brain.
And what about when you feed mice to snakes alive?
I don't know. I don't know. I'd love to hear from someone who agrees that this man should be arrested for this. FMTV@freemindsmedia.org is the email address.
$30,000.
Right. I want to hear from you guys.
Because you can eat fish in the UK.
I think it's gross to eat a live, slimy animal.
Alive.
Yeah, that's gross to me. Yucky. But that's where I draw the line. I was watching Survivor Man.
Or was it Man vs. Wild?
I don't know. He ate a frog.
Yeah, they eat animals on that show all the time.
He actually also captured a live fish from a brook and ate that. I wonder if they're going after him. Anyways, I think most of our viewers agree that this is...
Welsh.
But they're calling him... it's an appalling stunt. We do need to move on, Nick. We only have a few minutes to get into it, but I think it's important to talk about asinine government quotas and what they actually mean for what government officials do.
Yeah, and it has some pretty startling implications when you start putting quotas in place for people like air marshals, in this particular case, anybody who has powers of arrest or an intelligence agency that keeps information on you for the government. You could be on the secret government database or watch list for simply taking a picture on an airplane. Some federal air marshals say they're reporting your actions to meet a quota, even though most officials at higher levels are denying it. But these are the air marshals are remaining anonymous here, but there's a lot of statements being made. Basically, air marshals out of Las Vegas are saying that there is a quota in place, saying not only is there a quota in place, saying that they have to file these, I think they're surveillance detection reports, or SDRs. Basically, once a month, they're expected to produce a report saying that they observed some kind of suspicious activity. Now, that would make sense if they're actually observing suspicious activity, if that was just sort of like a rough estimate of the frequency of which they see things that they should write down. But in the case of at least the Las Vegas branch, they're saying it directly reflects on their performance evaluations if they're not making one report a month. And air marshals here are saying, when asked, have marshals in the Las Vegas office creatively reported things or are making some of this up, the answer was creative writing, stretching a long ways the truth, yes. And they're saying, even the air marshals are saying that this has serious consequences for people, but they kind of need to do it.
They put you on a list because you're suspicious.
Well, they file this report, and presumably it's going to be that information is going to be filed, and you're probably going to end up on.
And how is this supposed to be keeping us safe? Saying that air marshals have to file some kind of a suspicious report. What if nothing suspicious happens in a month?
I don't know if it's designed to keep us safe, but it's hard to justify.
What's it designed for?
Well, you have to justify these positions. If you have air marshals on airplanes for 5 years and they never file one report saying they saw somebody they thought might be suspicious.
Chances are they're not, Nick. How many 9/11s have there been? How much suspicious crap are you going to see on airplanes? How many more terrorists have there been? There was the shoe bomber. There was 9/11. There was some guy who supposedly
took care of the shoe bomber.
And there was some guy who supposedly tried to make a bomb out of soap. Did he actually?
Well, there was a diaper bomber.
Okay,
there was a shoe bomber and the diaper bomber.
Anyways, I mean, there's been like
why is it always articles of clothing?
I don't know, but there's been, how many have there been? How much suspicious activity is there? It seems like, unless they were on the flights of 9/11 and filed those reports, which I don't think they did, because if they were there, they would have gotten blown up. But,
well, on the shoe bomber you probably wouldn't want to file a report in that case. You probably want to stop the hijacking. I think at that point,
how many terrorists are on planes that are doing suspicious stuff and then exiting the plane and walking away? If there's a suspicious terrorist, shouldn't the air marshal go get him? Arrest them?
Yeah, if it's that suspicious, you would think so.
But instead, they're just writing this report and putting it on a list?
Right. So things like taking pictures or any kind of unusual behavior that's really not an indicator of terrorism.
I'm confused as to how this is keeping people safe.
It's not.
It seems like all it's doing is hurting people and wasting time and making liars out of these poor air marshals who can probably not sleep at night because they know they're doing bad things and making up stories about people, Nick. Imagine all the grief they go through, that inner turmoil of thinking that I'm not helping the world, I'm making it a worse place. You think they're eaten by guilt?
Maybe some of them. Some of them probably just jerks and don't care.
I want that bonus.
Yeah, but I mean, it does have serious consequences, and they're saying.
I've taken pictures on airplanes.
So it's gotta be fairly common.
First time I was on an airplane, I took pictures of outside because I thought it was cool. I'm on an airplane. I'm way up high. Look at those little houses down there. Am I on a list for that?
Maybe, because when a government agency sends out a memo saying that your agents are expected to produce at least one SDR report a month, to me that sounds like you better at least get one a month, whether you see something or not. And this doesn't just happen with air marshals. I mean, we're talking about this particular case, but this kind of thing I think happens all throughout the law enforcement community. Probably not as much on the local level where they're more responding to calls as they happen. I'm sure there are quotas.
I don't know. I hear all the time. Every week there's stories about how you have to have one cell phone arrest because he's talking on his cell phone and one speeding and one drunken driving every month or so. They definitely are out there.
But they're more busy with the day-to-day stuff than someone like an air marshal who's not routinely making arrests.
Anyways, Nick, we're out of time. If you have a different opinion, we'd love to hear it. Do you think that this is a good policy for the government to have? We don't, but we'd love to hear from you if you do. FreeMindsTV.com. From there, click on the contact button, the archives of the show, the radio show, and so much more. FreeMindsTV.com. Until next week, it's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Have a good one.